Welcome to day 2 of the Q3 2020 demo day for the Newchip Accelerator. My name is Armando Vera Carvajal, and I'm the program director here at the Newchip Accelerator. We are excited to have you all here joining us from every corner of the world. Our portfolio companies and founders have put so much effort into this global multi-day event, and we are thrilled to have you presenting today. For all investors joining us, we hope that you'll invest in a lot of our accelerator companies. And if you're a startup or an entrepreneur, we hope that you will learn from this unique experience. Now, to launch the second day of the Q3 demo day, we have invited a very special keynote who has an insane level of knowledge on product, marketing, and entrepreneurship in general. Please, without further ado, let me introduce Noah Kagan, founder and chief sumo at AppSumo. Noah, thank you so much for joining us. We are so fortunate that our timelines aligned so that you could join us today. We're really grateful for the time that you're giving our accelerator companies and investors, as well as the global startup ecosystem. I've personally followed your trajectory over the past few years and have been very impressed, to say the least.
Thanks,
by
man.
by your many accomplishments in the startup world. Before we dive into the conversation, I'd love to share a quick bio on who you are to share some context with our global audience. So for those of you who don't know, Noah is the taco-loving, I love tacos, taco-loving chief sumo at the 8-figure AppSumo.com, the #1 site online for software deals for entrepreneurs. Before AppSumo, Noah was employee number 30, that's 30 at Facebook, reporting directly to none other than Mark Zuckerberg. Also, bonus points for him being number 4 at Mint.com, was acquired by Intuit. Currently, Noah is focused on helping entrepreneurs overcome fear and find success on their business journey at youtube.com/okdork. Please subscribe if you aren't already following him. He also has an amazing podcast, Noah Kagan Presents. Very happy to have you here today, Noah. I'm going to start this conversation with a guiding question and then let you take the mic. The whole goal of this keynote is not just to inspire entrepreneurs, but to also shed light on the challenging journey that comes with starting and growing a startup. Now, we want to lift the veil of glamour, of success that so often shrouds that challenging reality that is entrepreneurship. The first point that I wanted to cover is that launching a startup, launching a company that can maybe one day change the world entails building a brand, not just putting out a product. And in your case, you experienced firsthand Facebook's transformation from a 30-person company to a 100-plus enterprise. You were also one of the first people at Mint. So these are both globally recognized brands with secular reach, impressive financial returns. But before they reached their market leadership, they started pretty small as startups.
Totally.
Tell us, what was your experience like at both places?
It's very broad. Thank you for having me. What is up, all my Newchip people? I'm rooting for you. And one thing I want to say for being an entrepreneurship, I think what gets missed out is it all starts with one customer. That's it. Facebook had one advertiser. Mint had one user. Every business, Microsoft, Amazon, it starts with one customer. And I think people lose sight of that. And some of the times in entrepreneurship, especially recently, a lot of times I just go back and help one person. And so those experiences, I think what's really interesting career-wise for myself or just entrepreneurship-wise is what are the tidal waves that are happening and how do you get your surfboard in there? And I think I've done a really good job in my career finding the waves that I just enjoyed. And I think that's missed in entrepreneurship, which is, hell, that's an opportunity. Let me go do a delivery gig business. It's like, well, do you really care about that? And so for me, I think with those experiences, it was number one, I was following stuff that I was interested in and actively passionate about. And secondly, the market sizes were gigantic. I mean, personal finance, you care about money. I care about money. It's a pretty big problem. And the experiences were wild, man. I think if you've ever been a part of hyper growth, it's an amazing thing. And I think especially a lot of startups out there, what they struggle with is that they're trying to push their ball up the hill. And they're like, hey, you really need this service. And the question is, do they really need it? And I think coronavirus at this time period has been amazing for businesses to say, hey, are you important or not important? And I think what I realized being at those two businesses is market size was big. I was interested in it, and people were desperate for what they had. And I think that's something as people are thinking about doing their own businesses, is this something that a specific group, a small audience is desperate for? And I think a lot of people miss out on that. One other thing I would say just marketing wise, that no one's going to do it. Hopefully you're going to be the one that'll do it out there. But the reality is that both those businesses we started very niche, and everyone starting out doesn't do it, but maybe one person I'm hoping will be influenced to get it done today, which is at Facebook, they started with Harvard, and at Mint.com, we started with personal finance bloggers. So there's a lot of different components of being those experiences, but those are some of the highlights.
Thank you. I mean, that's amazing. And diving a little bit deeper, you've been very open online about your experience. Specifically, you're partying with Facebook. There's even an article that you wrote titled Why I Got Fired from Facebook, a $100 million lesson. Tell us a little bit more about the events that led to this outcome and why you ultimately think that Facebook made that right decision. And what are the lessons that entrepreneurs can derive for their own businesses and their teams?
Well, I would fire the weaklings. Yeah, I mean, fire. One of the things I think about in work, but I think about in my relationships, I think about my friendships, is what does impressiveness mean to you? And at the end of the day, a company is built by two things: software or people. And at some point, you are limited by the quality of the people around you. And at Facebook, I think there's different, at every business, there's different people for different times. And especially if you're just getting started, I think I call it, there's 3 stages of hiring. And that was, one of the big takeaways for me. So when you're hiring people, stage 1 is, do they have a brain? So that's the first one. Stage 2 is, do they have a smart brain? And then stage 3 is expertise. And that is the evolution of hiring. And I think if people can get better at finding greatness to work with, that's going to separate the companies who are going to do okay versus the companies who are amazing. And so at Facebook, I don't think I was able to scale with that business. I remember we had a meeting. There was 30 people in a meeting. The company size was 150. And in my journal, I was reading it a little while ago, and it was like, I can't believe we have so many people here. Why do we need all these people? And I think that was just more about myself. And so I'd say the advice I'd recommend for everyone out there is just, if you've worked with anybody ever, male, female, animal, whatever it is that you've been impressed with, keep in touch with them. A lot of times if someone's been a good salesperson to me or a good marketer to me or a good business development person from another business or another startup, I try to think, all right, let me at least file or keep them in contact, because you never know. The internet is a small world. So I'd say 1, build your network, and not even build your network, just notice greatness. And 2, whatever you can do to be around it or work with it and impress yourself and be around impressive people, the better.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's one of the biggest challenges, right? When you're trying to get something off the ground, finding that talent, finding the right people is already hard enough. But finding people who not just have a brain, a smart brain, but who have that expertise, it's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. I mean, I'd say the 2 things with that is that how do you know when you're impressed? It's like, that's better than you could have imagined. And I want to only be around that. So there's definitely something with that. I think there's a part about letting go of people at companies. That the other thing I'd say, especially if you're starting out, they're always, well, how do I recruit these people? How do I get them excited? The best way to recruit someone is to have momentum. So what does that mean? Is that you want, so when I started AppSumo, I started it alone because I was like, I wanted total control, which is a whole another story. But it's much easier if you say, hey, here's my business. It's doing well. Come join me. Versus I think a lot of people who are starting are thinking, oh, well, I'm going to go try to convince this other guy or girl to come join me when I don't have anything. And I just figured it was easier to convince someone when you could show them instead of telling them.
It's a very powerful way to do things. It's interesting that you mentioned, how do you define that success and also the control part of it. I recall that part of your reasoning in that article for you being okay with the Facebook decision was that the marketing team there at the time, back when you were like a smaller company, wasn't actually doing anything to promote the new features that Facebook was pushing out. And you took it upon yourself to be proactive and line up the attention of the press and basically do the job of marketing. What do you think is, the lesson that can be derived for entrepreneurs, and how did you feel about what you were doing back then when marketing should have been doing what you were doing?
Last week, one of the guys on the ads team started running ads. I didn't ask him to do it. I was like, nice. He did something I didn't ask him to do. And I think those are the best people to work with. And how you do that in a business is you have a very clear goal and you let people know, like, whatever they do, as long as it's towards the goal, great. And Facebook taught me that. It's like we have one goal. For them, it was growth. For AppSumo, it's a revenue number. For my YouTube channel, it's a subscriber number. And as long as the team is aware of that, you want to be hiring people that don't ask for permission. If they go rogue, like Facebook called me a liability, which maybe I was that at that time, but I think it's more about alignment. And especially early on, like the people that impress me are the ones that are not like, hey, can I ask you to do this? It's like, well, if you were asking me all the time, like, what do you do here? And so I love being around people. The best people every person I've hired in the past 2 years, when they've applied for the job, they didn't apply. They've actually said, hey, they emailed me and said, hey, I see that you're doing this. Here's a free thing that I want to do for you, or I did for you, and I want to help you out with that. And I think those are the kind of people that I want to be around personally. And so I think you have to think about, if you're starting a business or if you want to be a part of a startup, how do you be that person?
By asking for that forgiveness, not that permission, especially. And I think that's something that a lot of founders basically cherish and hope for, because they want the proactivity. They want the people that will just do things, as I think Facebook likes to say, break stuff, and then, fix it.
Yeah, my favorite phrase lately with our team is, who's in charge? So they ask me, hey, what do you think? I'm like, who's in charge? And I think it's just reinforcing autonomy. What I've realized with the most, if you think about Amazon and its success, right? It's literally one of the biggest companies in the world. Let's just copy what they're doing. So what do? Is that they hire a lot of really smart CEOs. And they say, here's your goal. Here's your boundaries. You play the game however you'd like to play, and let me know if you get the end zone. And if you want coaching, I think that's where I'm spending more of my time, is like, I will try to build more CEOs within our own business in Sumo Group.
One thing that that really stands out from your story is that transition that Facebook went through, that very few people will have a chance to ever experience. And you got to experience that, going from 30 to 150 plus as a company. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you would just, zone out in those big group collaboration meetings, all the tracking processes that had to be created to basically scale an organization were just boring. And we can all agree that we just want to build things. We just want to make things work and look great. Tracking them is a very different thing. However, this was a very necessary step in the development of Facebook, from basically a small business to the behemoth that it is today. Would you share your thoughts on how startup founders should think about the cultural impact that comes with rapid growth and scale, especially when it will affect some of the earliest employees?
Well, I think most of the people I'm assuming in the audience are not at hypergrowth, and they're struggling, in my opinion. So in terms of the things around culture and expectations, I think a few of the bigger takeaways that we still use in Sumo Group is, how big is your vision? Mark's vision in 2005, when I was there, which is now 15 years ago, was to connect the whole world. And it's interesting because you will be as big as the vision that you think. And a lot of people are like, we're going to do this thing. It's like, well, all right, that's not very appealing. Like, we want to be the number one place online to help all entrepreneurs have success, right, at AppSumo. And that's pretty damn big. There's a lot of people who are entrepreneurs who want to be entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of people don't really have as big of visions. But on the flip side of that vision, I also don't think they're solving important enough problems for people. And connecting people turned out to be a very interesting problem that everyone once solved. And so culturally, I think what Mark did was that he convinced a lot of people that this is a big problem. He got people who cared about that problem. And I think what Mark did, and this is something I think about a lot, is like, what's the expectation of your culture? And so with sumo, we call them sumoisms. There's an expectation of excellence. And so what is it that you stand for in your business? So one of our sumoisms is good versus great. And so thinking about that, it's like, well, what if that's something I think what you have to think about for yourself is, where do you want to go and what are the expectations for how you're going to behave? And for us, it's like, is this something good we're doing or is this something great? And it's a nice way to kind of say, what are the values of your business?
I love that. I love that. It really just gets to the core. And I think oftentimes also asking, why are we doing this? Is it just good or is it great or is it amazing? So that it's worth our time and it can actually make an impact. Very, very, very important thinking for leaders and startups.
Well, just to add to that, I think the question is, what problem do you want to work on that there's never an ending? Right? Like Mark could have made $1 billion when he was 24 and he said, nope, I gave it up. He didn't want it because the problem and the work was what's mattered. And so I think when you're in startups, there's opportunity where you're like, oh, look, there's this new channel and this new stuff and let me just go do it. But I think long-term, like $1 million, $1 billion success comes from solving your own problems.
Exactly. And one thing I love to tell the companies in our program, you need to understand the problem that you're working on, but not just really understand it at the core. You need to be in love with that problem, solving the problem, not just solving it for the sake of solving it, but it should be something that has a big outlook, something that you can actually dive into deep. And for Mark's case, connecting the world was huge.
Yeah, pretty damn big. Turns out it's big. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, I liked solving stuff that, like, we built this thing, sendfox.com, and it's email marketing for content creators. And one of the things that we've been saying in our company a lot of the times, and I think this is very relevant for anyone in a startup today, is what are you going to be number one in the world at? So it's going to be hard to out Facebook in the way that if you go heads up, or out AppSumo and do AppSumo. So it's like, well, AppSumo, what can you be number one at? SendFox, number one email marketing tool for content creators. AppSumo, number one site online for software deals. So for you, what are you number one at? And I think what that helps do is figure out who your audience might be, and more specifically, and that's something that we think about a lot. And how do you have an advantage for that? And I think a lot of people are just like, well, I'm going to just compete. It's like, well, why don't you just try to figure out where there's no other competitors?
Yeah, that blue ocean, creating that opportunity. Noah, you've gone through experiences obviously with Facebook and Mint, but now you're with AppSumo. You've gained a lot of experience there. Tell us a little bit more about the steps that you took to build AppSumo, and also the big why. Like, why after all that you're doing this now?
So why AppSumo? My original intent of AppSumo was I wanted to make $3,000 a month and then go work on the beaches of Thailand. That's my fantasy, man. And I'm going to go back to Thailand again in October. That's the plan for now. But I think the why, a lot of our career is finding the things we don't like to do. Right? I always think of life as a buffet. You're like, let me try that one. Let me a little dab. Like, it's true with business and marketing and things of that nature. After trying different jobs, like I interned at Microsoft, I worked at a popcorn stand, I worked at Macy's and bed sheets. My first job was a cubicle at Intel. I was employee 1476599. It's my employee badge number. And after, maybe 10 years of doing a lot of things I didn't like, I think it led me to what I do like. And what I love is entrepreneurship. I don't think I'm going to be the next Elon Musk, but I think I'm going to help teach the person who will be that, and show them how to get the first customer, or how to do their marketing, or how to get that business going. And so I found that I got like the perfect job. My job is the intersection of marketing and technology. And for me with AppSumo, it was kind of identifying, I think business is like, where are you dissatisfied with, or what is the opportunity that's not being solved? And so for me, it was like, everyone needs help with marketing. And I think a lot of startups solve non-critical problems. They're like, oh, let me do this. And it's like, is that really that important? But everyone wants more customers. That is universal. Second thing, I was like, this software stuff is getting more popular, like cloud-based software and tools and things like that. And I saw like the daily deal Groupon model as an opportunity there of a new kind of marketing channel. And so I think you kind of have to connect some dots or connect some observations of like, what do you think the future is? And so that was really like a beautiful thing where like, wow, I can go get the software I want at a discount and then tell other people to go use it, and I can get paid for this. So that's been, that was amazing. One other thing I would say career-wise that I feel blessed about, and I've been reflecting on it a lot recently, is who else am I getting to meet in this industry? And I know that was a little surprising. So recently I'm content creating on YouTube, sharing like how to get started, how to overcome fear, how do we become an 8-figure business and beyond. And I get to meet all these really interesting content creators, like entertainers. And I think when in any of our industries, think about like the people you get to meet. And if maybe the people you meet suck, maybe there's a different type of industry. So for me, it was like with AppSumo, I was like, I get to meet the people making MailChimp, making LinkedIn, making FreshBooks, making all these new tools, PhoneWagon, like Hopem, Crello, like all these really interesting startups. And now I get to promote them and get paid for that. And so that's been a really special part of my career and being a part of AppSumo, where basically I get paid to do what I love. And all I have to do is go promote people. That's what I did at Mint. I promoted Mint, and I promoted Facebook, and I promoted all these things, and now it's my job. So I think it's kind of interesting, like how do you make your job or how do you make just the stuff you're interested in? How do you get paid for that? And I think I've heard a lot of people do, which disappoints me in startups, they're like, I'm going to do this one thing so I can get money and finally do the thing I really want to do. I'm like, just do the thing you want to do. And that's how you're going to get rich.
And it's going to take time, obviously, to build it out and have the money rolling in. But I think at the core, you need to find what you love. And it's interesting because I firmly believe, and I agree with what you're saying, find in that buffet exactly what it is that you want to have and double down on that. But a lot of people are just saying, just be a little bit more practical. Like, you don't have the luxury of finding it, just stick to what works.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of things, two things. So number one, if people are out there doing it for money, which you should do it for money to some extent, it takes 10 years to make $1 million. That is my 10-year rule. It takes 10 years to make $1 million. It took me 10 years to make my first $1 million. So my point there, though, is that you better find something you like. Because if you do different things for 10 years, you're not going to get the $1 million. You have to find the thing. So for me, it was AppSumo, and it took 10 years of doing it. We're in our 10th year to finally get rich. But I think the point there that I really stuck with that is that, one, you got to start now. And two, it's finding something that you want to work on for 10 years. And that takes time. Some people never get there in their career. I think there's people like my mom who just take jobs and they hate their professional life. And I think we spend she was a nurse. She just didn't like it. And I think we spend so much of our life working. Why not find the thing that doesn't feel like work and do that? And I have found by doing that, that's actually how I've ended up making the most money.
Having the fun and chasing the dream. I think, yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. And time
I want you to disagree more. I'm going to find something you're going to disagree. Let me find something you disagree with.
Well, something that I actually, before we get to the disagrees, something that you mentioned a little bit and that I've seen you talk a lot about in your content, in your blog, and in your talks, you talk about how the best way to get famous is to just focus on making amazing stuff, like building that product. And I think that goes to what you were just saying, like find what you're good at, find what you're enjoying, the money will roll in.
That sounds so easy. I'm like, hold on.
Right.
I love, like lately I've been playing a lot of chess, but I'm not getting rich off it. I think there's literally money to be made in everything. Money is not the hard part, right? It's just finding the thing that you enjoy doing. I think of it as a Venn diagram. Here's what I like to do. Here's what the world wants to pay for. Like, how do I find that little thing in the middle that I can get, paid to do the thing I enjoy?
Something that you've also mentioned in the past in your content is that we see so many like entrepreneurs focus much more on their self-promotion, their public image, than
Yeah.
actually doing what matters. Like they're not focusing on building a good product. They haven't heard your 10-year rule, right? That it takes 10 years to make a million. So they
It
think, well,
is.
in 10 minutes by just self-promoting myself, I can get rich fast.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is the startup ecosystem doing this much more nowadays? Or is it much more focused on just building really good products?
Well, the thing that I hate is when people are like, I'm creating value. And I was like, well, if you're creating so much value, why is no one paying you for it? I'm like, if it's so damn good, why are you poor? I think what's actually more interesting and something I've been reflecting on recently is how many people are you actually helping? And so this is the misconception in startups. Like, I built this, it's so great. I'm like, well, no one wants it. And a lot of times all I ask people when they're starting the business is I'm like, how many companies, like perfect example, let's just do a recruiting. Talked to someone last week. I'm building a recruiting website. It's got this new thing. I'm like, oh, sounds great. And I said, well, how many people have you gotten jobs? Actually, the thing that you're saying you're trying to do. None. Because I'm building the website. The website's going to do all the work. And here's the thing. You're laughing at this, Armando. Everyone in the audience that has zero revenue, this is you. And that's the part that's missing. It's like, just go get the result. So right now with YouTube and we have two things, two sayings, two Noah-isms. Number one, results over everything. Number one, results over everything. Because at the end of the day, if you want to make money, you get people what they want. And number two, this is from an ex-girlfriend of mine, it should be fun. Some of this time I'm doing this work, like I'm making this content, I'm not getting paid for it. And I do it because I love it, and I do it because I want to see people get results. And I'm like, man, this sucks. I'm like, well, it should be fun. All right, well, let me fix that because it should. It should be enjoyable. And so let me change something up or take a step back, come back into myself, be like, oh yeah, this should be fun. And so I think it should be fun in all the different startups. Like, how cool is, like, if the job, go working in a cubicle or working for someone, it's not a bad thing, and it's gonna pretty much always be around. But I think the idea of, if you want to create your own business, which I don't think everyone should, sucks most of the time. Sometimes it's amazing and sometimes it sucks. But it should be something that you're like, man, this is pretty damn sweet. I can't believe I get to do this.
But yeah, you also have this podcast, Noah Kagan Presents. You've actually interviewed some very impressive people. I saw Robert Bilyeu, the other
Tom Bilyeu, Bo
Tom
Jackson, Mike Posner.
Yeah, super
Some
impressive.
dope.
What were some of the steps that you've had to take to get where you are today as an influential thought leader in the global entrepreneurial system?
Wow, that sounded very fancy. How do you become I've thought about this, like, how do you build a brand, right? A lot of times in businesses, if you're starting any startup out there, people buy from businesses, but they trust people. I was like, Jeff Bezos cheated on his wife. I don't know if everyone knows that, by the way, but somehow we still trust Amazon. So maybe it's not always true. I think it's crazy you break up with your woman for 50 billion. Like, this is like a really, like, this woman's worth 50 billion. How crazy is that? The girl he left his wife for. And so in terms of being a thought leader and things like that, sorry for the jokes. Oh, I'm not sorry for the jokes. I think to be a thought leader, there's different things around it. I think everyone should become a thought leader, at least, even if you don't become a thought leader or you don't want to be a public person, I think you should practice writing. You should practice speaking. You should practice even, to yourself. And why that is that in all of the startups, you're selling something. And the more that you can speak eloquently, the more that you can write effectively, that's sales. And so I think everyone should practice writing, regardless if you want to be a public person or not. In terms of thought leadership, I think the things I've observed in the experiences, I enjoy doing it, number one. And number two, I've done it for 20 years. So I've been blogging. If you go to archive.org, my site has been around since 2000. And it's evolved over the years. And I think it's kind of a cool diary of my professional thoughts. And I think in terms of being a thought leader, the best way to be a thought leader is pick 3 core messages. So what are your core messages? So for me, one of them is challenges. Next is $1 Million Weekend. So how do you start a $1 million business? And I talk about like the 10-year rule. And then third is behind the scenes of an 8-figure company. So like, here's the things to do to get to an 8-figure business. And so I think you have to think about what are your core messages. Next up that I think about for thought leadership is, who are you writing for? You're writing for women? You're writing for binary people? You're writing for men? You're writing for like old guys? You're writing for bald guys like me and you? And the more narrow your audience, the better. So as an example, with the content we're putting out for my YouTube channel, it's for people who are around 25 to 40, male only. And entrepreneurs are people who have jobs that have tried to do a startup that have not succeeded. Because if the people have not started it or not tried it, I generally don't like them because they're not willing to do the work. And if they're super successful, it's not as big of an audience. And then, a lot of the times with thought leadership, put a lot of different thoughts out there, tweet them, Instagram, blog, YouTube, whatever, and notice where you get responses. And so I've noticed with my content recently, there's kind of like 2 or 3 topics that people go like, oh, give me more. 1, business ideas. I put out a thing about business ideas. People love it. 2, make money. And then 3, email marketing. And those are honestly things I'm really good at and things I really like talking about and exploring. But there are, I think part of that is also sharing different content and seeing what people don't like. I've shared about relationships. I've shared about working out of a van and things like that. And I think at the end of the day in business, a lot of what you're doing is some level of pattern recognition. So in content or in your startup, whatever it is, and this is a key thing, and you mentioned this earlier, Armando, is you really have to pay attention to what's working. And I think that's a part of why our company's been able to build an 8-figure bootstrap business is there's 2 pieces of noticing what's working. Doubling down on what's working is actually what's more important than doubling down is almost what are you stopping? And I think a lot of people miss that. They think they do. But in your startup, the question really is to ask yourself is what is actually working? And how far have you gone with it? And let me give you an example. I was talking to a person who built a Shopify app. And I said, well, how's it going? He's like, dude, we're blowing up. I'm like, I don't get the whole blowing up thing. I mean, doesn't that mean you're dying? But they're growing really fast is what he's implying. And I was like, oh, dude, well, how's your marketing? He's like, oh, man, we're doing everything. I'm like, tell me. He's like, well, we got blog posts and we're partnering with Shopify apps. And I'm like, really? I'm like, have you doubled down? He's like, oh, yeah, we doubled down. I'm like, well, how many blog posts are you doing? He's like, we do 2 a week. I was like, well, why aren't you doing 2 a day? And people think they're doubling down, but they're not. And I think part of our success at AppSumo.com specifically and why it's done so well is we found what works. Eamon, the guy who runs it, I would say he's done a phenomenal job, him and his team, find what works and extreme double down.
Yeah.
So as examples, like we found email marketing works. Now there's a team of 5 on email. We found affiliate marketing. Now there's a team of 5 on affiliate marketing. We found YouTube is working. Now there's a team of, I think there's 2 people just doing YouTube content. Then they found that sales is working. So now they have a team of 10. Then they found blogging is working. So I think there's a team of 9. And that's also that we experiment with a lot of things that don't work. I think that it's kind of one of the things in business that's fascinating is like all the stuff that doesn't work, you don't hear about. You don't hear about, like I've done 23 other businesses that did not work.
Wow.
One that I started worked finally to make millions of dollars. And that's over 20 years. And you don't hear about that part of it. So again, in terms of doubling down, I really encourage everyone, if you're doing a startup, just look at like, all right, well, what thing of my customers is really interesting? What's really working there? How do I do more of that? And then at the same time, what am I going to kill? What am I going to stop? So for example, with content, we're doing all the social media. You got to be on social. And we're putting on LinkedIn, we're posting on Instagram, we're posting, but my goal and the way I recommend goal setting, and you can see it on YouTube how I do it, is just pick one numerical goal for the year. That's it. Just one thing. And mine is YouTube. I want to get 250,000 subscribers this year. And so looking at it, you have to be strategic. So we mapped out this month, we want to get 15,000 new subs. How are we going to get them exactly? Where are they going to come from? And what's interesting is like LinkedIn, Instagram, all these places don't drive anything. So one of the guys that I hired a team, and I think there's a big difference between an amateur and a professional. A professional treats it like a business, an amateur treats it like a hobby. He asked me, he's like, hey, should I be posting on Instagram? I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. So what's our goal? 250,000 subscribers. How much is Instagram helping us get that goal? He's like, it's not. Sounds like maybe you know.
You had the answer all along. I love that. It's such a
Everyone, here's the problem though. Everyone knows this shit. Everyone hears this stuff. They
yeah.
don't do it though. They're like, "Oh, I'm doubling down." I'm like, "You're not." I stop what's working. You don't. I would bet because we don't want to lose. And so, especially when you start a startup, it's it's not opportunity cost, but when everyone this is literally everyone. And here's the thing. What do the biggest companies in the world do? Works. And what does everyone do? The opposite. And so what do I mean by that is when you start a startup, the fact that anyone gives you $1, I'm like, you're going to give me $1? Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. I want all of it. Give it to me. And so they'll take all these customers. So like SendFox, for instance, it's our email marketing for content creators. We have romance novelists. We have Chinese websites. We have all these random ass businesses that are not content creators. Why? Because we want that money.
Right.
And the more that we can actually say no to those people and build products that don't serve them so they can go to MailChimp or go to Klaviyo or go to somewhere else, the more successful we will become. But we have to be willing to say no. Why we don't say no is because we're greedy and we're a startup and we like the money. But at the end of the day, if you look at what the biggest companies in the world, the biggest, every single one of the most giant startup tech companies started niche. Name anyone, challenge me, you. Not Armando, but you there. Name one. Facebook, Harvard. Amazon, books. Microsoft, developer tools. Dell, cheap computers for UT campus. What up, Texas? Name a company out there. IBM, what was it? Calculators, whatever the frick it was.
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is looking at, I was talking with James Clear, the author, yesterday. He's like, dude, just look at what the best in the world do and see what you can learn.
Right.
But for some reason, we're all like, no, I'm going to be the one exception.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so much wisdom coming out from this. We're getting close to time, but Noah, as a parting thought for the audience, what advice, and you've shared a lot of really good advice and you have lots of great advice online in your content, but right here, right now, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who want to change the world forever?
They probably won't. Here, think about this. Think about this. Mark Zuckerberg in 100 years won't matter. So you think you will? And I think that's actually liberating. Because if nothing actually matters, just do the thing that matters most to you. Because I think there's something interesting. We all want legacy. If you want legacy, like just buy a plaque and put it on a building. And then guess what? They're going to tear that building down in 100 years and you're still not going to matter. And I'm not trying to be a nihilist and not life doesn't matter and life is dark. But I think it's just really trying to, follow your impulses is what I'm exploring. And follow the things that you're like, man, I could work on this for the next 10 years. And one of the things that I've been working on, and a lot of what I've been working on recently is I love starting things. I love startups. I don't like stop-ups. or corporate ups. I like the start up part. But I think what's interesting in startups is that, at least for myself, is I'm so focused on the destination. I want to get to $1 million. I want to get this many customers. I want to get to the end of this thing. And eventually we're going to get to the end of life, and that's death. Right. And the thing that I'm really exploring with is just like, how do I just enjoy the journey? And I hated when people said that before. It's the journey, not the destination. Well, I'm like, well, shit. Well, why don't you enjoy the journey while I get to the $1 million? Loser. No, but what I'm saying with that is, for me, I'm really trying to just enjoy the hard part. I'm trying to just enjoy. Like today, I'm in San Francisco visiting for a few weeks, and I just went and got a coffee and a croissant. And I don't generally like croissants, but I just sat there. I took a breath, and I said, man, this is cool. I'm in SF. I'm eating a chocolate toasted croissant. I'm drinking a coffee. This is pretty damn cool. And I think if you're working at any of your startups, whatever problem you're working on, take a step back and appreciate that you're not working in some cubicle for some schmo. You're getting to, work on problems hopefully that matter to you. You're hopefully getting to work with cool people. You're hopefully getting to help amazing customers, and just appreciate the things that we're actually doing. And I think sometimes we're just so focused on like the next thing or the accomplishment or the lack of funding or trying to meet this person or get this thing that it's just like, maybe it's a lot better than I thought or than I think.
Thank you. I mean, that's amazing. And that really resonates with me. And And I hope it resonates with everybody who's watching, investors, entrepreneurs. Noah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, and your insight has been truly inspirational. For everybody who wants to follow Noah, follow him online. Check out his company website, appsumo.com.
Yeah. If they have phones, like get out your phone right now, go to appsumo.com, give your email address, and you'll get tools to, learn and grow how to grow your startup. And then make sure to subscribe on YouTube, Noah Kagan. I'm going to see you out there.
Please do. Please do. Thank you so much, Noah. We look forward to having you here in the future. And thank you again for coming with us today to demonstrate.
Thanks for having me, y'all. Kick ass out there, y'all. I'm rooting for you. Make sure, kick ass. That's it.